Thank you for joining us today for this presentation about our curriculum solution for medical coding. It starts with Conquer Medical Coding, our text. I will be presenting in the beginning here, talking a little bit about the whole solution. And with me today is Colleen Keenan with our e-learning services, and she'll actually be doing a live demonstration of Medical Coding Lab, which is one piece of the curriculum solution we offer. So to start with, when we were developing Conquer Medical Coding and the accompanying Medical Coding Lab, we want to make sure it really had some key pieces for it. You know, we were able to develop it from the ground up for ICD-10 as a new offering and very relevant right now. One of the other things is that it has, it's organized like your code books are organized. So it makes it easier for a student when they are in the chapters, in the chapters of the textbook, to make the correlation in the code books and be able to better learn how to use the code books. And then, as I was mentioning, we're going to do the Medical Coding Lab demo. That actually comes included with the text. When a student purchases a new text, they get an access code on the inside front cover to Medical Coding Lab. And then finally, and I saved the best piece for the last in this particular slide, are what we are calling Pinpoint the Code. And these are decision-making flowcharts that are really unique to our solution. Here is an example of one. And, you know, this is just, it's allowing students to get into the thought process, giving them a nice visual that they can walk through and become more accustomed with what that thought process is. And it's a reproducible process. It's really nice for different kinds of learners when it's this visual representation as well. There are several of these throughout the text, I believe 52 total, to give students this kind of ability to look at coding from a different perspective, to look at it, to how you do it. So throughout the text, we have some other key features that were really something that when we talked to instructors and what those missing pieces were for their students and what they really needed. Part of what came out of that was, of course, those Pinpoint the Code flowcharts, but also some of these other key features that you'll see within the text. Very important that you'll see within the text, the workbook, and also on Medical Coding Lab, is the use of cases, because we really did hear the feedback that those real-life scenarios are some of the most valuable practice that your students are going to be able to do. Also, there's features that guide your students through medical documentation because, of course, they need to learn how to be able to read and extract the appropriate information to be able to code accurately. And then there are these boxes that are throughout that really help students be able to connect the dots and understand. You can see here's some examples here, the pharmacology connection, pathophysiology connection, and reimbursement review. We've received some really great feedback, especially about that pharmacology connection, because you just don't really always see that kind of connection being made with some of the other foundational texts and learning programs out there. Our chapter summaries are really different than what your typical chapter summary would be. They're very detailed. We've even had some instructors provide feedback that they like using these as an introduction to the chapter, having students read this first before they really get into the meat of the chapter because it's such a thorough review. So we really are presenting this as our complete curriculum solution. This would include the workbook as well and instructors' resources. I will review just very quickly a couple things with the workbook. Take a look at, again, the case studies. The workbook is filled with them. And then we have these item-specific rubrics, which are really intended for helping with teaching, for grading, and really being able to make sure the student has an understanding of the material based on these rubrics, be able to use these rubrics. And now I was going to move on to the instructor resources. We've really done a lot to try to make it easy for you. We're starting with the PowerPoints. When you look at this, here's an example of, it's more than just a PowerPoint slide, but you can see there's some notes there. In some cases, there are just such highly detailed notes within the PowerPoint, within the PowerPoint slides, that it's really designed to be extremely helpful to, if you have multiple instructors, to really kind of help make that a more consistent experience as well. And speaking of that, we also have these LessonPro lesson plans, which give you detailed lesson outlines. It even goes as far to tell you that here is the agenda for 45 minutes. You spend 10 minutes in the opener. You have the learning outcomes that are 5 minutes. Over here on the right-hand side, it tells you which resources, what you would be using within Medical Coding Lab, and even links to the instructor resources for you to access them quickly. You can see the instructor's guide, PowerPoint slides, test bank, image bank. I can, when I'm logged into this on Davis Plus, I can link to these other resources right from my LessonPro lesson plan. This is page 2 of that lesson plan. It gives you a better view of some of these margin notes and what they're trying to show to you. It even gives you then the homework activities and a look ahead as you're trying to plan and present. So what's exciting about this, we say it's like a curriculum in a box. So we try to provide you everything you need with the lesson plan, LessonPro lesson plans, wrapping around all of those resources and making it easy for you to adopt Conquer Medical Coding and implement all of the resources that we have and really make it that complete curriculum. And finally, I will go over Medical Coding Lab very briefly because we're going to have Colleen do the live demonstration. So one of the things you'll get to see that's really nice is the grade book, which is going to automatically report most of your grades. It also gives students that view, and Colleen will show you that in detail. We have a lot of different exercise types so that students get lots of practice. And then we have specific exercise types, so that you'll see that we designed an exercise type that's specific for ICD-10, the build medical codes, and then a different type of activity that works better for the CPT chapters called Analyze a Code. And another really unique feature within the Medical Coding Lab are our capstone cases, which will actually allow students to work on cases where it synthesizes everything they've learned, something to be able to assign at the end, assign as part of a final exam, but really unique in the sense that all the other cases within Medical Coding Lab really are for the specific chapters, as are what you're working in the workbook and the book, but these capstone cases really require students be able to synthesize what they've learned, and really it reflects on what they'll have to do in the professional workplace. So with that said, I'm going to hand this over to Colleen so that she can do her live demonstration.
Thanks, Molly. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and so Molly, if you can confirm that you can see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes, looks good, and I can hear you.
All right, thank you. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about Medical Coding Lab. It's one of my favorite online resources that we have at FA Davis. Let me tell you how I'm going to approach this demonstration, and then we'll go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start with the student side of things show you the content under the hood, so to speak. And then I'll switch gears and show you the instructor side and show you some of the controls and levers you can pull as an instructor to pace your students through the content. I'll stop for questions along the way, so don't forget that there's a Q&A panel down in the right-hand corner of your screen. Type them as you think them. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, what you're looking at right here is the student dashboard. I'm going to give you the lay of the land, and then I'll click into some exercises and show you how the content is presented to the student. So up at the top part of my screen, what you notice is that the students have their own grade book. This is in the right-hand column where I'm circling my mouse. The grade book updates in live time, so the exercises within Medical Coding Lab are graded automatically. That carries through to the student grade book and to your grade book. There's a discussion forum that you can utilize. You can also see that you can provide feedback to your students on certain activity types, and it will give the students a little indication that they have some comments from their instructor waiting to be reviewed. There's also an ebook. They can launch the entire ebook, or from within a particular lesson, there's a chapter that applies to the lesson and they can launch it right there. And it looks very similar to what you saw Molly show earlier. So a match to the book that you would see in print. So let's talk about how the lessons are presented to the students, and then we'll look at one of the exercises. One thing that I really like about Medical Coding Lab is that the navigation is super clean. Everything is presented in a consistent format, and you don't have to think too hard on where you need to start as a student. So the lessons start with a link to the chapter that applies to the lesson, some flashcards, which is a really nice resource for the students. They can pull this up at any time, maybe refresh their memory before they're heading into an exam. Don't Tip the Scale is a really fun activity. You know, we try to shake up the content. You never know what will stick with a student, so Don't Tip the Scale is like a hangman type exercise, just designed to be presented in a way that's different from just on the page. Short answer, I always think of these as critical thinking exercises. They're open-ended text questions that the students will type in themselves. Build medical codes, that's a really fun exercise where you drag and drop and build the codes. And then finally, the case studies. These are really worth your time to review when you go into Medical Coding Lab on your own. Really good content with some nice questions that follow up. So I'll go ahead and click into a lesson. You'll notice at the top screen, there's little bubbles as I work as a student. They change from gray to blue to note that I've completed some work. I'll go ahead and I'm going to click into, I'll start with Build Medical Codes. We'll start there. I'll show you some exercises. Whoop, 1 second. I'll show you some exercises and then we'll stop for questions. Bear with me for 1 moment. Cooking with gas, clicking back in. Okay. Building medical codes. So it starts out with some instructions to the student, and now they will drag and drop as they build the codes. So this is a nice part of the call where I will confess to you that I don't have a background in coding, but bear with me. I'll click through these questions just so you can see how the information is presented back to the students upon completing the exercise. All right, so on this screen, what you see is I'm being given the option to be graded as a student or click review. So a lot of instructors will use this as a passport to class. And what I mean by that is you say to your students, do the work, do the reading, do the work within Coding Lab before you come to class. Let the students practice as many times as they want, and when they have their sea legs, they click the grade button. Now what you see here is I get that immediate feedback on what's correct and what's incorrect. I can try again, or with this nice little handy navigation tip, I can move to the next exercise. So let's take a quick look at the flashcards. Okay, so here they are. There's 18 in this one lesson alone. So many, many flashcards at the students' fingertips that they can pull up and access as they need them. Let's take a look at Don't Tip the Scale, then we'll move to case studies. So you already know my background, that I don't have a coding history, but I do know from my Vanna White days to start with a vowel, but you get the idea. Choose your letters, and then you get scored. So it's kind of fun. It's fun to be given an opportunity to do a fun activity instead of just memorization. They're really thinking about what they're doing. Let's take a look at the case studies. Okay, here's the case study that the students would read. When they move forward with the questions, you notice from a navigation standpoint, they can pull that case study back up as they're answering the questions because really nobody can commit everything, that whole case study, to memory. So I'll click through pretty quickly. And there we go. Again, that live scoring that updates in the student's gradebook and your gradebook right when the student completes it. So Molly, this seems like a good time to hit pause. Are there any questions that I should answer?
Well, just so that our attendees know that we are getting the question, but I will have you answer this later. It's a great question. It asks about whether the gradebook will transfer over to Blackboard, and that is definitely something that you'll be demonstrating when we get to the gradebook. So we'll get to that question in just a minute.
Yeah, that's a nice segue. Okay, great, Molly. Thanks for letting me know about that question. I'll move over into the instructor side of things. This is what you're going to see when you log into Medical Coding Lab for the first time. You'll note that right next to the little image of Medical Coding Lab, there's this button called Preview Student View. If I were you, that's the first thing I would click on upon logging into Medical Coding Lab, because it's your ticket in to how the information is presented to the student. The next thing that I would do, if I was you, is I would look at the Davis Plus resource page. Remember, Molly was reviewing all those nice resources given to you as an instructor. They live in Davis Plus. There's a link right at your fingertips. I would be sure to check that out as well. If you like what you see on the student side and the Davis Plus instructor resources, the next thing I might do is I might take it for a spin and I would click that orange Create Class button, and it will take you into a screen that looks like this. Okay, so think of it like this. You really have two paths to go down as an instructor. If you're looking at the content on the student side and you think to yourself, you know what, I love it all. I want my students to have every exercise type, and I plan on covering every chapter or lesson. If that's where you are, the good news is this is the only screen that you need to touch from a setup standpoint. You give the class a title, a description, a start and an end date. The start and the end date are just the dates that your students can submit work to your gradebook. They don't lose access to the product after your class date ends. Auto-enroll, for those of you with many students, or if you just like time savers, click the auto-enroll button. It means that every student who puts in a request to your class will automatically be admitted into your class. And then auto-import grades will bring forward work that's already been completed by the student. So maybe if you had an ambitious student and they started working on a lesson before class started, you could bring that work forward. So from a setup standpoint, really class setup is less than a minute, maybe even less than 30 seconds if you're not doing any customization. But you can customize. Let me show you what your options are. You can do some of these options or all of them. You can really flex the tool however you like. So option one is the lesson reorder. You can drag the lessons into any order that you like. So maybe you want to teach out of sync with the book and you want Medical Coding Lab to match your syllabus. Just drag the lessons to whatever order you like. If you decide maybe this is a little too much content for your students and you're not going to have time to cover every lesson, if you drag that lesson to the right, you're essentially taking it off of the menu for the students so that they don't see that work and waste time working on something that you don't plan on covering. Next, at the lesson setting page, this is where I always say you can kind of roll up your sleeves, really get down in the weeds and customize to your heart's content. So option one, for every lesson, you could give the lesson a start date and a due date. So I would think of this as giving your students bite-sized pieces of information as they need it. So week one, lesson one, week two, lesson two, and you're really releasing the information to them at the time that you're reviewing it in class. Next, we have grading rules. So from a grading rule standpoint, you have three options. Option 1 is initial practice, then grade. You'll note that this is the default setting and very popular. So for any instructor that's looking to flip the classroom, so to speak, or use that passport to class model, practice then grade allows your students to really become comfortable with the content. When they feel ready, they click the grade button and they move forward to the next lesson. Or you could turn everything into a test and say grade on first attempt. You get one try, one grade. The other end of that spectrum is practice only, where essentially you tell your students, I don't even want you worrying about the grades in medical coding lab. I just want you to focus on learning. So practice as many times as you want until you feel confident. Finally, down at the exercise level, you can really flex this tool to its fullest capacity and customize on an exercise by exercise basis. So the first thing to note is you could unclick an exercise and take a particular exercise off of the menu. Notice that this is a live link. So if you're not sure if you want to cover it, just go ahead and click into it and take a closer look to see if you want to include it. Additionally, you can mix and match the grading rules. So let's say, for instance, you want to keep everything in practice mode, but when the students graduate up to the case studies, you want to make those grade on first attempt. I always think of the customization options in medical coding lab like a rubber band. You can really stretch it any way that you want so that it fits your unique needs. Okay, so that was a lot of information, Molly. I think I'll just hit the pause button right here and make sure we don't have any questions lingering out there.
We had one very good question that I will go ahead and take, and that was, can the flashcards and answers be printed out so students can keep and review later? And not, since it's a subscription-based product, it's not really something that allows for those to be printed out, but students can always, during the time they have access, they can always get access, and no matter which device they're using. So they could review the flashcards on a smartphone. We have created the medical coding lab so that it adapts to whatever device they're using, making it very easy for them to be able to review the flashcards or go back in and review the answers to the questions from whether it's a tablet, their computer, or smartphone. So that's how we deal with giving students the access to be able to review. And let me see, we may have, let's make sure. And then there was a question if we have an instructor's manual that can be downloaded, and that is yes. So part of what Colleen was showing you, that you could link right over to Davis Plus and the instructor resources. There is actually the LessonPro lesson plans are something that you can download, but there's also an instructor's guide that comes with it that can be downloaded as well. All right, so back to you now, Colleen.
Thanks, Molly. And I think I'll pick up that thread earlier on the gradebook. So I mentioned how the gradebook updates in live time for the instructor. So I'll go ahead and click into my class gradebook here. I want to call your attention to a few things before I click into a particular student. First of all, to the question of, is the gradebook compatible with learning management system? I think the question was Blackboard. The answer is yes. We're compatible with most major LMS systems. I click the Export Gradebook button. You can see these are my options. The way I think about syncing up the gradebooks is this. Step 1 is you download our gradebook. Step 2, you upload it to your LMS system, and you're done. It's really just a 2-step process. Now, down at the student level, I want to call your attention to a couple of things. Number 1, notice this time spent column. This shows up on the student side of things as well as your side. It's a really nice window into work habit. So I'll go ahead and I'll click into one of these students. And now what you see is on a lesson by lesson basis, it's tracking time spent and also calculating the grade as the student progresses. So I'll go ahead and click into a particular lesson. And now what you'll see, even more interestingly, I think, is how much time they spend on each exercise. So I happen to know this student, it's me, and I clicked through pretty quickly. But if this was your student, certainly you'd have a conversation about work habit. It's mere seconds. The other thing that I want you to know is that when the students complete their work, everything comes through to your grade book. So if you need to take a closer look at the students' work and figure out what are they struggling with, are they even in the right ballpark, you can pull up their work and see how they actually answered each question. Okay, I'm going to get back to my dashboard and show a couple of more things, and then we'll pause for questions and wrap it up. Okay, so I mentioned auto-enroll. That's a really nice feature within Medical Coding Lab so that you don't have to manually admit your students into your class one by one by one. There are some other nice features within Medical Coding Lab that save you and your colleagues a lot of time. The first thing that I want to mention is the clone class feature. So for anyone who's teaching multiple sections, maybe you teach semester to semester, if you do customize, you certainly don't want to customize year after year or semester after semester. Cloning is just copying out your master course so that all of that customization you've already done comes forward. Now, picking up that same thread, let's say Molly and I are co-teaching, and I might say to Molly, oh, good news, I think I'll just take the lead on this Medical Coding Lab thing, set up all the customization. And what I could do is I could tell Molly, I'll copy the class out for you, and then I'll invite you in to the copied course. Now, as the owner of the master class and copied course, I can give Molly certain permissions. I could set her up as read-only or give her full access. How do you do it? It's really easy. You just click Add New Instructor, put the instructor's email in, and you're done. So maybe Molly's an adjunct, and I don't want her to change anything. I want to make sure all the students have the same experience. So I could set Molly up as read-only access, but she could still see all of her students' work. Or maybe Molly and I are just brainstorming. I say, listen, here's what I did with my course. Take a look at what I did. Do with it what you will. The point is, it gets you out of your silos and teaching from the same platform, so to speak, and on a consistent basis. So those are really the high notes from the instructor and student side. Molly, were there any additional questions that have come in?
We don't have current questions, so I think it might be a good time to also show the support resources.
Yep, nice segue. So right now, you're really looking at things at the beginning part of things, trying to decide if this will work for your program. Let me tell you what will happen if you do decide to adopt. We support all of our instructors by offering a one-on-one onboarding session. We also offer group webinars where we review how to set up your course. In addition to that, you see on our Support Center page, we offer videos that show you everything you need to know about Coding Lab. And we also offer Getting Started manuals, click-by-click instructions that get you from point A to point Z, so to speak. The truth of the matter is Medical Coding Lab is very intuitive. You don't have to think hard on where to go and what to do. But if you need a helping hand, we have many different options for you. So on that note, Molly, I think that if there are no additional questions, I can pass it back to you.
We have one question, which I may and actually have you show one of the capstone case studies, which would be on the student preview side. Because the question is, when students see an answer, is there something that provides additional feedback or resource to go to other than just the answer? And I will say, so most of the activities are the way that Colleen had already shown, where it gives the immediate feedback, but it just marks the incorrect and gives the correct answer. We do have the capstone case studies, which are intended to kind of synthesize everything together. And so when you do those, they do provide some rationales. And Colleen, you can see these are even a little bit longer case studies too. Colleen's going to go through there really quickly so that we can see the rationale that provides.
Yes, I love the capstone case studies. I can't believe I didn't hit these on the student side, but here you go. Here are the rationales.
And it's nice for these because these are more complex questions. They're asking them to kind of answer the questions based on the entire set of knowledge instead of just what's in that chapter.
Good question. Any others, Molly?
There was just one more question about whether this would be used as a supplement to the regular course text, and I say yes. We really look at Medical Coding Lab as part of the total solution in conjunction with the Conquer Medical Coding text and the workbook, especially if, when we look at trying to provide kind of enough case studies and enough practice, it's really the complete suite of products that we feel would really give the students the kind of practice and familiarity with like real life case scenarios with the complete package. So I think, and actually it looks like then that was the last question that we had. So I will have you pass back the ball to me now.
Okay, great. Thanks everyone for your time. And back to you, Molly.
I just have then one more slide that I want to wrap us up with, just to give you kind of next steps from here. If you are still interested, or even if you're not, you can complete the end of webinar survey. We give you an option to say, don't bug me anymore, but definitely complete the end of webinar survey so that we know next steps to proceed with you. We encourage you to take advantage of the preview access of Medical Coding Lab. You can always go through the student preview and actually get an ebook version of the book that way as well. And you can, if you have more questions or wanted to go more in depth with anything today, definitely contact us at coding@fadavis.com, and we can have a more in-depth one-on-one. Perhaps you have other colleagues that you need to share this with, and we are here to do that. So with that, I thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.